Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Modern Web Podcast. I am your host, Jesse Tomchak, software architect at This. Modern Web is brought to you by my employer, This.co. We are a consultancy. We do staff augmentation, training. We'll build anything you need, front end or back end, JavaScript, top to bottom. Give us a ring. We're also hiring. You can reach out to us at This.co. Today, we have a very, very special guest. Tanner Linsley is in the house. Hello, Tanner. How are you?
Hello. Good to be here.
Hello. Now, our audience, I'm going to guess everybody should know Tanner Linsley. But for people who are like, maybe not totally paying attention or not, maybe just don't have the time to like stay up to date. Because honestly, it's a fire hose of news and information and stuff. Yeah, it's a full-time job, right? There's people like me that spend all day keeping up. And then there's other people that are actually doing work. So for those people who have actually been doing the work, Tanner, what have you been up to for the last couple months, and sort of what do you do in the JS ecosystem?
Well, a couple years ago, I started a few open source libraries, React Table and React Query. They got pretty popular. React Query really kind of took off. Over the last year or two, we've turned it agnostic, so it works with any framework. And it's been going really well. For the last year and a half, I've been working hard on a new router, a new type-safe router. Originally, it was meant to be kind of an agnostic router, which is kind of an oxymoron a little bit that I'm learning. So now we're back to focusing just on React. So I have this type-safe React router now. That's most of what I've been working on. And then just very recently been dipping my toes into meta framework, or maybe even meta framework land.
Meta framework. Yeah, I feel like the ecosystem is building on top of itself or devouring itself in meta layers of frameworks, which I have really come to enjoy. Like, I've always thought of React as a primitive, not to be taken verbatim or in a vanilla stack. It's like, you're going to end up doing a lot of work with import like npm react yourself. Like, you need routing, you need state, like that is literally just a cornerstone, like a little tiny cornerstone of the other things. And you've built all these other tools. So what is this meta that you've started to explore? Is this come off of your work from router, or the need, or
a little bit? It's a little bit of everything. You know, I've stayed away from it because the tools that I've had have been really good. Like, I used Next for a really long time, and Next is great. I even serve TanStack.com off of Remix right now, and it's fantastic. But most of my development work spawns from building my startup application. I guess when do you stop calling a company a startup? I don't know. But
I think either when you hit the NASDAQ, you ring the bell, or you don't know everybody in the company. I think at that point.
Right. Like, so I guess we're still a startup. We've been going for like 8 or 9 years. And it's a SaaS product. So we essentially reverse engineer Google search rankings into big data.
Oh, interesting.
And then provide that back to whoever cares about it, which is usually like enterprise SEO teams and people who care about rank tracking in Google. So anyways, that's the SaaS product that we have. And so a lot of what I build is to solve problems with what we encounter there.
Is that where React Table started as solving?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
React Table and React Query.
I'm like putting the picture together in my head where like you've got these tables, this data ranking, this big data, and you're like, oh, I need some tables. So React Table. And then I need some better query and caching. So React Query. Like these. Oh, exactly. Okay. Now I'm starting to see this like progression.
Yeah, there's a small charting library I wrote that's React only. There's a virtualization library that I wrote, a headless virtualization library.
Yep, I've used that for those big long lists. That's been super helpful.
Yep. Yeah. And then the router recently is because most of our users' navigation is inside of the router, obviously inside of the router, but I mean inside of the dashboards that we have. Mm-hmm. And those are like the dashboards, like miniature apps that you're moving around from app to app.
So there's a lot of nested routing, right? Like
and there's a lot of state involved. And sometimes, like when you're moving from dashboard to dashboard, you're carrying some of the state with you and some of it you're leaving behind. And it can get really complex. So that's kind of what spawned the type safety around the router thing, is I needed all of my routes to be very strict on like what search params does it support, what are the path params like. When you're navigating from one route to another, it needs to have this very strict contract of like where you're coming from and where you're going to and what data you have access to make that transition correctly. So that's really what spawned a lot of the work with
Yeah.
the router that I
For
was
the
doing.
dashboard stuff, does this, one of the things with routing that I've run into in sort of carrying over state and parameters and queries is to take a canonical URL and drop back into and populate that state. Is that part of going from dashboard to dashboard? Because like a lot of
Yeah.
web apps that I'm on, like I want to be like, here, go here. Like you want to be, but you can't get there without all the 2 or 3 steps before that, without the selections, without the filtering, without the, you know, e-commerce has a lot of this where it's like, look, show me kids shoes, size 4 in blue. And like send that to, you know, my mom so she can buy stuff for the kids. Like,
Yeah,
is this the struggle that you hit?
absolutely. Because with our dashboards, we have like some of them only have 3 widgets, some of them have 8 in a big old data table, and you know, quick selections and filters and conditions, and all of that is all of that lives in the URL search params now. So
Yeah.
and all of it's created in one transaction as well. So anytime you're navigating somewhere, you're taking all of the search parameters you have that are all typed and safe, and you're transforming them in some way into a new URL search parameter set. And then the link is being generated using that new set. So you know, in one transaction, you go from here's the URL I'm on to here's the URL I'm going to. You know, it's got this big old long search string after it, but it's like you can take that URL, just copy it, send it to somebody, they paste it in, and they'll get exactly the same state that you would get if you were to click the link. So
Yeah. Which is, having just talked for like the last 10 minutes about the complexity of it, is such a simple action to get so much packed into just a single canonical URL to be able to always like, I feel like in native work, like we often work in like deep linking where it's like, oh, give me some stuff and then I'll parse it out, you know, but those are passed by like objects and stuff. And I feel like the web is inherently different in this idea of sharing deep-seated parts of the app where it's like you need to drop in at any point and come from either this direction or back this direction, like the
yeah,
direction, the geographical directional space. I think I often feel overwhelmed by, oh, I forgot this, oh, I forgot that, oh, this option, like coming back and
yeah,
forth and up and down.
yeah. It really starts to reveal how much we rely on like ephemeral application state that just kind of sits in memory. So many apps do it, and now when I'm moving around the web, like I'll turn a filter on or go to a page or whatever, and if you just hit refresh on the page, it's gone. You know, you lose all that state. It's really, really frustrating. Some of them will keep it sometimes, and
Bits
hopefully
and
it's in the
pieces.
URL, or sometimes it's like in local storage, and you're like, well, now I can't get rid of it. You know, so it's a challenge. It's one that I'm hoping to help solve a little bit with this.
Yeah, I had that this morning. I was filling out a form, and it's like drop in this your document, and it's like we'll pre-populate it, and it totally hosed the thing. And I was like, well, I'll just use a different document, and it's like no, it's like
Yeah,
I don't have any concept of that previous document. You are stuck now with everything filled out, totally garbage. Like it like chewed
right.
up everything and just vomit. So I ended up like dumping the whole thing, logging out and logging back in just to get to the like, hey, would you like to use a document to populate this? Like I had to come all the way back out and like scrub it down. And I was just like, I don't do regular people do this? Do they even know like what's happening?
Yeah. No, regular people, they just give up. It's
They're
like,
just like,
never
yeah.
mind.
I actually, that thought crossed my mind. It's like, I don't have the time for this. But it's like a kid school activity that had to get done. So it was like, well, back in we go.
Yeah, got to do it.
So you have teased a little bit recently about the TanStack Starter. So we've gone from charts and tables and sort of solving your own need and to routing and the dashboard. What is happening with this next evolution? That what's the problem space that you have encountered that has required additional tooling, if it were?
Yeah, a lot of it comes from it's been popularized by Remix and Next and a lot of other frameworks that and for me personally, Solid Start is obviously, it's called TanStack Start because Solid Start is awesome. But this idea that you can kind of just run some server code, but without having to, build out this massive API, right? The ability to kind of deploy server code right next to your application, your front end application, and execute some logic there, return some caching headers, right? Just have an opportunity to run something on the server at the edge, even if it, I'm not serving up my own API. I have a whole backend team at Nozzle that does that for me, right? But there's certain things that they don't want to do and can't really do in a distributed way. But I could if I had kind of this back end, front end as a back end kind of a setup, right? So one of the things that we want to do is actually recently I have wanted to build up a fuzzy search cache, a quick search cache using some of the popular libraries and build out the index for it in the cloud, like at the edge distributed. So build out the index and then cache that index at the edge for all of our users. And then that way we can pull that index down and cache it at the CDN and the browser level, and then load that index into the library to do quick searches.
Yeah, I like
And
that a lot.
that gets hard because we have some indexes that would probably get into I don't know, hopefully no bigger than like the 100 megabyte range, hopefully less if it's gzipped. And this is stuff that only pertains to specific users. If we were to do it internally in our API, we would be shoving a bunch of stuff into Kubernetes and managing a distributed service where we just have that at the edge already with like Cloudflare or Vercel or something like that. So that's something that I've wanted to do, but I can't do that right now because right now our app is just an SPA, right? There's no server aspect of it at all. So that means that I would need something like Next or Remix to give me the ability to do that. And I've actually considered using those, right? And I went down both of those paths recently. But I'll be the first to admit that I was just not ready to give up all of my type safe routing stuff.
Yeah.
To do that properly, you have to buy into the Remix or the Next router, and their types are getting better. But they're not built for TypeScript. And they're definitely not built for like these really big complex search parameter applications. There's no way that I could give that up. So
Yeah.
I was kind of at this crossroad, right? I either needed to consider giving myself this superpower, building my own thing, or I had the thought of possibly, well, maybe I could take the the typed router stuff that I've done and the search param stuff that I've done, and I could take it back to Next and Remix and
Sort
say,
of
hey,
pull it
yeah,
upstream.
and say, hey, I'll help you guys do this. I'll help you do that. I reached out, and it doesn't seem like something they would be interested in right now. I know in the past, that not just them, but many routers out there that I've talked with in the past, they're just not interested in the search param, the advanced search param story, because either they don't build applications that get that complex with search params, or they just don't see it as a need, and that's fine. I have that need already, so I don't need to validate that. And the type safety stuff, I don't think anybody can really argue with that, but to be honest, it requires thought about types from the ground up, and it would most definitely require, like, to get the level of type safety I'm getting in TanStack router, it would require rewrites for both like Next and Remix and Gatsby routers. So
Yeah, because these
I
are
don't blame
fundamentally
them.
different approaches when I build a
Yeah.
router and then I add type safety to it is a fundamentally different mental model than
Yeah.
I build a type and then the router is a product of those type interactions, right?
Yeah.
I've done stuff like Elm and PureScript, and it mentally I had to like do this thing where it was like, okay, I have to build the model. Like I had a really hard time with it because it's like it made me build the model first, and that my muscle doesn't do that. I would like start with actions, and then it would be super angry because it's like, what are you going to
Yeah.
put here? And I was like, I don't know, but this is what I need to do. And it's like, dude, you don't have anything to put here. And it's like, I'll get to that. And it's like, dude, you got to start with that. And it's like,
Right.
so I had like some bicycle training, some real training wheels happening there. So I can understand the difference for that sort of bolting on or coming back at it. Ooh, what have we got here?
Like this is, I just wanted to like show this off for a second. So this is just the route file, like just the file to handle like route definitions and things that you can do with a route. And there's just so many types and generics going on here. So
yeah, for our audience listening in, we are scrolling through hundreds of lines of T parent route types, all params, ampersand T parent context. Let's just just take like a matrix wall of types pouring over you.
Let's see how many generics do we have in here so far? We've got let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. So right now our route options type has 14 generics. Some of them are kind of complex, but not too bad. And then all of those generics. So imagine 14 generic slots, and they have to get passed around to everything. So they're going into the route component. We're sucking those generics up out of options like loader and search param validation, parse params, and then ultimately this is my favorite. There's an any route here.
I was going to ask you.
Export interface any route, and it extends route, and then we have 14 any's all in a row, right?
This might be. I feel like maybe you're calling me out where this is how I write TypeScript, where it's just like route extends 14 YOLOs.
And I mean, this is necessary though, right? So this is basically to say, hey, we accept any route, and in this contract, we will accept any route. We're going to infer the type of the route, but it could be anything. And to do that properly, you do have to pass any 14 times for all of those.
You really got to leave that door open and then sort of infer it down from there, right?
Yeah. The actual route class has, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 generics. So the only other library that I've seen kind of get into this area of complexity is TRPC, for good reason. And TRPC is magical, right?
Yeah.
So like this is just a small illustration of what it takes to think type first.
And this is just at the start, right? We haven't even gone into any of the sort of like transition or inference or logical pieces for that.
Right.
So let me ask you this. So we're looking at sort of the beginning of this sort of complexity. What is the benefit, like on your day-to-day dev, like you're working on the dashboard, you've got a feature open, you've got filters and things happening. Because oftentimes TypeScript will just vomit in my face with these obtuse things that are like, this doesn't match this other thing. And so I really struggle with some of the error messaging. How does this upfront work that you've done in type modeling for your router, how does that, where's the payoff for you?
I'll have to describe it as me and you look at it for those who are listening.
This makes for amazing podcast work.
So what we're looking at is a file for like a route that displays an individual post, right? And at the top of this file, we have a loader. It's called post loader. And it's really just a small wrapper around a function that's just fetching, a post from, currently it's JSON placeholder API, right? We're just fetching a fake post from somewhere, but it could be anything. It could be an API.
Okay.
And then down below, we have the actual route definition where, we've defined kind of the structure inside of our route hierarchy, its parent. We've defined the path. We have some context that we're getting for our route. We're specifying our loader, which tells our route how to wait until our data has arrived. And then there's
Interesting.
finally the component where we're taking the data that we have fetched and putting it into some JSX to display, right? So in fact, I want you, Jesse, look at this file and find as much TypeScript in this file as you can. I want you to show me the
Oh
places that
wow.
there's TypeScript.
So line nine's got a string identifier, a string type
Yep.
on it, and then params. Nope, that's just destructuring. Okay, we're looking at about 55 lines of everything you described, and I see one string like one string
Right.
type, just one.
There is technically one more part on line 15, but this is
Oh,
a
yep,
cast because our API is just a fetch call. It's not type safe.
yeah,
We're casting it as a post type, like the type of the data that we're getting. But in a great scenario, like at Nozzle, all of our stuff is typed. We use Buff and gRPC, so all of our API stuff is typed. So ideally, yes, you would only have that one line on line 9 where we're saying, hey, when you fetch a post, you need to pass a post ID. It has to be a string, and that's just because we're proxying through that post ID into the fetch call. So we just want to make sure it's a string.
yeah.
Um, but that's the only line. So we've got 55 lines of code here for an entire route to fetch the data, pass it through, process it a little bit, and display it. And we had to write one line of TypeScript. Now, everything that I hover over in this example now, if you watch the tooltips that hover over on these types, they are exactly what you
Yeah,
would
they're all
expect
spot
them to
on.
be. Yep.
There's no the inference is right down to the loaders. I think my biggest shock is that the context understands what it, because usually context is fairly ambiguous. It's usually got uh,
Yeah.
some params and some clients, some requests and some queries, some other it's got whatever we whatever we shove on context. So it's usually like,
Here's
what is
yeah.
this?
Here's an interesting one. I'm hovered over the route context right now. And we're seeing the route context that we have for our parent and the entire router right here. So there's two contexts above us technically. There's the route above us, which is the index for the posts page. And you can actually see the posts loader, not the individual post loader. The posts loader is in our context because we put that in our context on the parent route, and we can see that here.
Oh
And
wow.
then also we have the router context, which is the context for the entire router that we injected up at the top of our router. So for dependency injection, we put in our loader client, or for all intents and purposes, it could be anything. It could be a query client, an Apollo client, a relay client, whatever. So all of the context is carrying down through the entire router, and you get access through all of that. So
Wow. Okay, that is pretty slick. I think you might have, well, you definitely have made so far the most compelling case for TypeScript I feel like I've ever seen. Is like, how much TypeScript do you see here? And yet it is all helping and inferring the bits and pieces that context is coming down from. That's fantastic.
yeah, I feel like this is something that you just don't see in the wild very much. I mean, worst case scenario, you're working with JavaScript and it's terrible. The next best case scenario is you've got a library that has types, but those types are just really shallow and they don't really know a whole lot about your data. They might have the right properties on them,
A
right?
general shape.
Static properties and shapes and things, yes. Um, but then after that, you'll have the next level up is a library that has really good generics and that can understand the types that you are feeding it and build upon those. And I think that's kind of where a lot of us have been over the last couple of years. We're like, that's kind of the goal. This is really where I want to take things next, where not only do we have all of those other things, but now you don't even need to specify, what those generics are. Basically going for full inference on all of your types. There should only be a very, very few places where you have to manually specify a type. And honestly, wherever you do that, it should be getting checked on both sides, both on input and output. If it's going to be accepted where you're sending it, or if you've got conflicts of what you're calling it with, like that
Yeah.
post ID where it's a string, that that's going into a fetch, into a fetch call with a string. So it kind of needs to be a string or a number, and that's fine. But if we were calling a type to API and it wasn't the right type, we'd see an error, right? And that's the whole point, is that you shouldn't have to write TypeScript, really, a whole lot of TypeScript. It should just work. And it takes a lot of work to get there.
I feel like a lot of the frustration that I come across, that I experience, is in fighting those general shapes into submission, into what I need, rather than being sort of helped or guided by, the sort of generics and exact shapes.
Yeah. And I'd like to point out too that it's the same way throughout our entire app. We're not doing a whole lot of search parameters in this app, which is fine. But basically everywhere we go, you don't see a whole lot of types. There we have one, we're exporting the post type, ID, title, body, but that's because our API isn't typed. Even in our route, like we're not, we're setting up a router context that says, hey, we're going to pass the loader client into our app. But then we're expected to pass that later in the router. So, yeah, it's really weird. You go from writing JavaScript to writing TypeScript, and then if you get good enough at it or use the right libraries, then you end up just going back to writing JavaScript. It's really it's interesting.
It's that meme where we just get to galaxy mind.
Yeah. Right.
Very, very slowly just working our way back to type safe JavaScript.
And actually what I've been showing you is kind of the bare bones of TanStack Start as well.
I did notice that at the top. I was like, "What? You seem to be." What I think one of the things that really catches me when we look at your router is the explicit nature of, rather than route-based components, is that it's a very explicit route that has like a parent component, a context, a component, a load, a loader to it. Like, right? It's very explicit in the sort of shape that it takes. And then I saw you've got the server, the loader, and the server. So how does this all work together? You've got several routes, and then the server just sits sort of under. Walk me through this.
I'll walk you through it a little bit. So the parts that we know about as of today. So let me walk you through the parts down here in the loader. Or in the route. So in the route, we have a loader option, very much like Remix or get server-side props from Next, right? The difference here is that this loader does not execute on the server. Basically most, if not all of what you see executes on the client or isomorphically during SSR. So what this loader property is doing is we're taking an asset, we're taking some asynchronous asset, and we are waiting for it to be ready. And then so we're actually awaiting in this loader. It's asynchronous. So we're telling our route to wait for that to load until it's done so we can render our component. The difference here is that there's no serialization boundary between loader and component. So in this case, I'm actually returning a hook that's going to get used in our component to load up the data that we just waited for. You'll notice here there's kind of this weird.
I see loader,
loader.
Yeah, loader called and then invoked.
Yep. So we're grabbing use loader will give us back the function we created up here.
Okay.
And then we can call it again, and we're literally getting the loader instance that we passed right here. use instance. So it's a lazily invoked hook. We're dependency injecting our hook, which is really cool.
Okay.
So everything that you've seen right here is still just client side or isomorphic. There's really no server part of it at all right now. That comes in up here in the loader. And I want to point this out. So we kind of have a double naming problem here. I'm trying to figure out, but there's the loader and the route. And then there's this other library that you notice up at the top called React Loaders at TanStack/React Loaders. I want you to think of this as just a React query light.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not really, it has really nothing to do with the router. It's designed to work well with it, but it's mostly just like a React query light. Right here, we're passing a max age of 500 or 5,000. So it's going to be stale after 5 seconds. We're going to hold on to it and cache it, right? And do SWR style caching. But after 5 seconds, it's going to become stale. And then we pass a function. And this function, if we took out this server, this would run on the client right here.
Oh, just by the removal of the server $sign.
Yep. So right now, everything is running on the client. We would actually load this. This would run isomorphically. So this would run on the server and it would run on the client. But by adding back in this server $sign wrapper around this function, we're creating a server RPC, and this is super hot right now. Everybody's talking about it, right? Yep. In fact, there's been a lot of drama online about it already, about who invented what, and who had it first, and it's total garbage. But at the end of the day, every framework worth their salt is going to have something like this, or already has it, right? Mm-hmm. It's a way to RPC into the server from client side code and execute some server code, and then call back into the client and return the data, right? And this is the way that we arrived at here, because this might look familiar if you've ever seen Solid Start.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was like. I feel like this is similar to, but I couldn't put my mind on it.
Yeah. Solid Start has this primitive and a few other primitives that we're going to be bringing to the table as well. But this essentially, this code that drove all of this lived in Solid Start for, since Ryan Carniato and Nikhil Saraf wrote it. Nikhil is actually the one behind a lot of this. And so I've been working closely with him and Ryan to extract this code out into a framework agnostic utility that you could technically say, oh, I really like that server $sign functionality. I want that in my framework. And so you can just import it. And as long as you're using Vite, it will work.
Excellent.
So this server $sign is actually being imported from at TanStack/Bling/server.
Okay.
And that might change, that import and everything might change where it comes from. But for now, it's a separate repo. It's called Bling is the name that we've given it because of all the $signs that you're probably going to see.
Nice.
But essentially the idea behind Bling is that, it kind of takes me back to the question of why, I asked a lot of people over the last few months. It's like, what is a framework? Everybody kept asking me, are you building a framework? I'm like, what do you mean? What is a framework? And everybody had different answers. Well, it's the router. Well, it's, it's SSR. It's hydration. It's, all these different things. And it's like, yes, it's all of those things. But why do we have to think about all those things in such a monolithic way, right? So after talking with Ryan Carniato about it a lot, we kind of arrived at, there's just really a few pieces to having a framework that need to be there. You need a good router.
Yep.
And then you need to have a great deployment story so that you can deploy server run or isomorphic apps, right?
Yep.
And then you need to have a good story around the RPC and the code separation. Otherwise, you're back to, some files only run on the server, some files only run on the client, which is actually really similar to like React server components. They've chosen to go with the use client and use server, right?
Yeah.
And right now, at least me and Ryan Carniato believe that that's a great coarse abstraction, but we want something a little more fine grained, which is why we're doing server, right? This isn't file based, and it's not export based like Remix. And Next.js is pretty much file based now with their new file based router.
Yeah,
This
everything
this
living.
is this is scope based, right? This is token based, where we're wrapping certain things up inside of your code and then creating new virtual modules and extracting that out into their own interfaces. So we believe it's really valuable, and so we've decided to pull this Bling code out into its own repo. And so Solid Start is going to use the same code that TanStack Start is using to accomplish all of this. It's all going to be using just Bling.
Wow. Okay. So we've got the sort of modularization. So if I npm run build and deploy, um, currently TanStack Bling has this sort of server wrapper, so I can looking at sort of the page that we've described with the post and the loader and the get context that renders this function for my mental model. I can say that this function is going to always run server side as it is now, and it will be. And I'm looking at. I really like your query light because I see max age, I see a function, I see on validate. I assume now my head says I assume I could put on success in here and do like a sort of server query function and then just tie that to the loader in this route. Do I have the right sort of construct?
Yes, you do. The idea is that the route and the loader, they're just they're just a means to an end, an implementation detail. They don't describe where the code runs, they just describe when it runs. And so I want you to imagine, instead of seeing new loader with max age 500, just swap that out for use query from React Query. And in your use query function, you just call out into a server $. So you say, hey, use query, but my query function is a server function. So it's going to RPC out, run some code on the server to grab whatever you want, bring it back, across the wire, return it to your use query function, and now you're good.
Okay.
And really, as long as whatever library you want to use supports some form of data persistence and hydration, then you can use it with TanStack Router. That's the interesting part too, I think, is that TanStack Router doesn't really store any of your data, your loader data. I mean, it does store data that pertains to your route. So it stores your search params.
Yeah, anything sort of on the context, right?
Yeah, anything related to actual routing, it stores. But like the loader data, you'll notice that none of the data or anything we're returning in our loader is being stored in the router. In fact, we don't even need to dehydrate and hydrate the router state at all when we're doing SSR. The state that we have to dehydrate and hydrate is where our data lives. So in this case, React loaders, or it'll be TanStack Query, or Apollo or Urkel or something like that. So yeah, it decouples the data from the router in a really good way.
Okay. Wow. I'm like just letting it sort of like wash over me and trying to sort of take it all in.
And this server $ marker, that's really just the beginning. There's a lot of other ones. Like Solid Start has the idea of islands, right? So there's going to be an island $ that does exist, I think, in Solid Start. Maybe I'm wrong. There's going to be an island $. There's also going to be a client $, which is interesting. It's not for RPCs, but it's a way to explicitly tell the compiler that this code should never run on the server. It only runs on the client. So it's kind of the reverse. You
Okay.
can't call from the server into the client, so it just kind of is there, right?
Yeah.
And then a new one that I'm working on right now, which is going to be a really fun one, I think. So if you look at this route that we have here, this page, if we had like a really expensive UI component, like in our post component that's like displaying it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we were like popping in AG grid, which is huge.
Big.
Love AG grid. I love AG grid. And I have my own table library. We kind of work together on a lot of fun stuff. But shout out to AG grid. But if you wanted to load AG grid inside of this component, it's like, whoa, you want to code split that, right? Well, the way you would have to do that right now is you'd have to rip your component function out into another file.
Yep.
And then do your little import lazy magic,
Yep.
right? To do that.
I'm thinking like, yeah, next dynamic import load
Right.
on yada, yada, yada.
And instead of doing that, you're really going to just be able to do this, right? Split $, wrap your function up in it. And then you can actually do your React lazy import right here. Don't even need to wrap it. You can just do lazy like that, something like that. So because Bling has this unique opportunity moment to kind of sift through your code and make changes to it on the fly with Vite, we have the opportunity to do a lot of other things as well. And basically, module bundle splitting is possible in the same file under the same mechanics, the same technological mechanics that we have. So instead of creating a server function that we rip it out on the client, but we leave it on the server, in this case, split would just rip it out into a new virtual module and return an asynchronous import to that virtual module inside of the code that we had it.
For you, so, instead of us writing that breakout file that takes like the sort of boilerplate dance that is like, okay, lazy dynamically import this when this component loads. And
exactly.
And this is happening on build time, on compile.
Yeah.
So when we build and compile, it's going to come through and during like tokenization, I assume, hit split and be like, hey, I'm supposed to do.
Yep. It's going to say, whatever's inside of this split function, we're going to extract it out and put it into a new virtual file, right? It's a new virtual file for Vite. And we're going to put everything in there for that function, and then we're going to scan the rest of the old file for any of the dependencies that it relied on. So in this case, it would be like use loader, right? Would need to come over. And I think that's it, because there's no other dependencies in here. But if there were any other dependencies or imports you were relying on, it would also include those and bring them over into the other file as well, and then remove them from this file if they're no longer used. So it's literally just kind of doing, I know there's a library out there called this, but like mitosis, right? It's just like ripping apart your module in a very granular way, saying, here's the function we need to be over here, and here's everything else. Grab their dependencies that it needs, remove the ones that are no longer needed, and then you end up with these two separate files. So that's the idea behind it.
It never occurred to me that the sort of ceremonial dance where I create that new component and then dynamically, lazily import that stuff and then come back and do it. Never occurred to me in my head that I was doing it because the build compiler step doesn't know about it. There's no signal, there's no flag, there's no marker, there's no, I just assumed that in the parsing that it was like, oh, like it just had to be over here because of the way it would, and it never occurred to me that yeah, it had to be that way because nobody ever told the compiler, like, you got to tell it that, hey, right here, do that thing for me. And I am always a huge fan of making the compiler do as much of this mental acrobat work for me. Like I know what needs to happen, but taking the 7 steps to pull this out. Like I think I lost like half a day once doing a dynamic import because I would like pull it out and then when it would load, it wasn't there. And I was like, because I didn't do the ceremony correctly, right? I was doing the import incorrectly. So I lost like a half a day and I was super frustrated. And then of course, like every good dev story, the next morning it just worked magically, you know?
And I think this pattern, the idea behind these tokens, it's something that's actually, so it's become normalized and like solid, right? And we can see this taken to an extreme with like a framework like Quick, where it's just built into the framework that everywhere you use the $, it's doing kind of this really granular code splitting and for resumability and stuff. But what I think is really interesting is the difference between frameworks like Next and Remix, where they're working off of convention for automatic code splitting. They're doing all of this for you as well. They're splitting your components. They're splitting everything that they know they can, right?
Yeah, tree shaking out the dead stuff and doing, all that work.
But the difference is that you can only really, you only get that automatic code splitting in those places of convention.
Yeah.
With a tool like this, okay, yes, I have to remember to put the server $sign around the things that I want to run on the server. So it's more of an opt-in. But with that opt-in, you get the ability to now server split on anywhere you want. And you can code split anywhere that you want, right?
What did you use the word granular? You were like, it's a very granular sort of, whereas when I sit in Next or Remix, like it's very much like, not cookie cutter is not the right word I want, but it's very cow path, right? There's distinct lines that you sort of follow.
Happy path. It's great. It's good, but it's coarse, right?
Yeah.
COA or SE, right? You have to follow the the instructions the right way. Pros and cons to both of them, but from where I'm coming from, and especially I think Ryan Carniato sides with me on this too, is that I like to think about things from the most advanced use case and the most granular use cases that you'll have. Primitives that will be used, at the lowest level of composition, and then work up from there. There's really nothing saying that we couldn't add a little extra compilation step to, to our own CLI or something like that, our own Vite plugin that looks for components in your routes and just automatically wraps them with a server $sign, right?
Yeah.
Or looks for loaders and automatically wraps things with servers. So I think it's a really promising pattern. I'm really excited about it. And it's kind of going back high level again. That's really a bulk of the framework is right there. There's only one piece that we didn't talk about was the deployment.
Oh yeah, which we marked as one of like the important parts.
Right. I don't know if you've been following along at all, but that is definitely something that I do not want to write. I can't tell you the deployment, like the deployment strategy and the deployment code. I look at frameworks like let's look at Next, Gatsby, and Remix, some of the most popular frameworks out there, and Solid, really any framework right now. All of them are doing the same exact work. They're all maintaining
like 19 adapters.
Yeah, they're all maintaining adapters for all of these deployment strategies. And anytime one of them changes, they all have to upgrade. They're all doing it kind of in a different way. And I just think that's bogus. And on top of that, we're not just talking about the deployment strategy, but we're also talking about the server environment, right? All of them have the goal of being, cloud native, server friendly, right? To the ability to run at the edge in a really lightweight V8 instance or whatever, Cloudflare V8 instance. I don't know what they're running, but they all have that same goal. They all have that same deployment strategy, and they all have implemented their own server environment packagers and server environment runtimes kind of, and then they all have their own deployment strategy. It's not something I wanted to write. It's honestly one of the biggest reasons why I just didn't make a framework over the last few years anyway, because I'm like, that just seems stupid. I would have more quickly written my framework to take Next.js and just rip everything out and just put back in what I wanted so that I could just use kind of the deployment story. But it was probably about a month ago, a couple of weeks ago, that I was talking with Ryan Carniato and Fred from Astro. And Fred deserves to be on here just as much as Ryan does. But we were talking about this, and Fred's like, well, we do the same thing at Astro. We have all the deployment adapters.
And, yeah.
We have our own server runtime, but something that is unique and awesome about Astro is that it doesn't have any opinions about meta framework. It is a framework in and of itself, right? They have Astro files and stuff, but they stay very hands off. They're like, you can use whatever you want. You want to use Vue, you want to use React, Solid, whatever. And that's kind of what drove us to start talking about, well, what could a world look like where Solid Start was just built on top of Astro? And I was like, whoa, if you could build Solid Start on top of Astro, then that means I could build my own framework on top of Astro too. And so we would be consolidating our efforts and saying, we're going to use Astro for the things that it's amazing at. It's an amazing build tool. It has great content generation stuff that just came out. It has
the formatter.
Yeah.
Although, well, as soon as you start putting your JavaScript in an YAML file, I'm going to start giving you the side eye.
Right. But it has all the deployment strategies just baked in, same as everybody else, right? Yep. Except for that it's all unopinionated. It just says, we're going to run your JavaScript wherever you want to go. It's not, we're going to run your React, or we're going to run your Solid or whatever. It's just JavaScript. And that was the key. So we decided, me and Ryan decided we were going to start working with the Astro team to see if this was possible. And this example that I was just showing you today was built on Astro. So Astro is the deployment, the build, and the server runtime environment.
Oh, snap.
And then everything after that is just TanStack Router and Bling. In fact, actually, I can show you too. I don't know if you're actually going to share, if you're going to do the video.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those who can see, if we come up to this Astro application, we have an Astro configuration file here. And all we're doing here is just importing the TanStack Start Astro integration. And we add that in. And then over here in our Astro pages file, we have a hello.astro, which is just like a normal Astro HTML page. So you can have your marketing site if you want, right?
Yeah.
Like your actual Astro content islands and all that. Or you could serve up Vue if you wanted. I don't know. But then over here in this catch-all route, or it could be just like in an admin route or whatever, you can mount TanStack Start at a specific route handler in Astro. What? So right here, we grab the request handler out of our server entry for our application, and we export it as all under this API route for Astro. And that's going to let us control all of the request response lifecycle.
And so then that just build and run Astro will just send. Okay, there it is. I was going to say, I was like, does that just send all of it?
Yeah.
Right
Astro to there? Picks up. It's like, oh, we're routing to this app.ts file. And then there's this handler here. So Astro just hands it off and says, here you go.
Here you go.
And then from there, we have our own request handler where we pass in, hey, here's how to create our router. And if we look at our router, it's got, our loader client, how we dehydrate and hydrate. Yeah. It's got wrapping providers. We're registering types. And then there's our route tree with all of our routes right there. And then our entry client just looks like this. We import the start client. We create our router. And then we render the start client.
Wow. All just sitting on top of the Astro config.
Yeah.
With the specific adapters to wherever you want to like wherever Astro adapts, you just sort of like do your like collab for Vercel, Nullify, home VBox,
wherever.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And as long as your server code that you're running into your server $, as long as you're running that code in a way that's going to work in your deploy destination, then it's going to work just fine.
Tanner, I feel like you just melted. My mind is like just started dripping out of my ears. Like I had talked with Ryan. We talked solid like a half a year, maybe last fall or even last summer, and we talked about adapters and the actual thrashing of like and pain and like I think he ranked it just above like email as an awful thing that is like mundane and awful
Yeah.
and like has to be like constantly, and it's so much effort and so many cycles and so much, and everybody, it's the same. Like there's no differentiator, there's no benefit, there's no sparkly new. It's just, dude, it's just the adapter. Like it is just a dumb like A to
Yeah.
B cable. Like there's nothing to it. But yeah, we were
it's cabling.
both gateway. We were both super frustrated with it. I'm sure Fred is equally as frustrated with the sort of constant cat and mouse chasing of adapters, right? Because you've got all these different deployments, and it's like, and it's always downstream work. Like you never know when it's coming. It just sort of happens sporadically and in waves, and so the idea to take Astro and then put your solid.js Start and TanStack Start right on top of it and get to this is one of those points of inflection where it's like, I feel like you got straight to your business logic, the part that you were concerned with, on top of stuff that everyone else had sort of have worked to put together. And that sort of collaboration really moves the community forward, really stretches like the work, the speed, the things you've shown today, like for everyone listening on the show, you're going to go to YouTube/this dot, and you're going to sit down and re-listen to me and Tanner and watch this thing, because you're listening to it and you're sort of putting it together in your mind, and you're thinking like, oh wow, okay, I can like sort of see it, I can sort of put it together. You need to see it, because this is really cool stuff that is happening, and the nuance, and when you see it, you're just gonna be like, what?
They really are. It's going to be, they are great primitives, and we're just trying to share it, right? Astro is a fantastic tool, and so many good things come from Astro as well. Like, yes, they're handling the adapters, but it's not just that. They've got a wonderful story around content management now, and it's just going to get better. And you have the ability to run, to split and say, yeah, we just want a marketing site, and then we want an app, right?
Which we all have done 1,000 times, right?
Yeah.
We have a marketing site, and then we need app.
Yeah, and hey, you want to run TanStack Start and Solid Start? You can do that in the same Astro app.
Oh, did you just say micro framework or micro front ends? Did you say micro front ends?
Micro meta frameworks.
I think you just found the title of this episode. It's micro meta front ends.
You can't really run them side by side on the same page, at least as of today. But in the same application, in the same application, same Astro app, you could do that, because Astro is a friend to all, right? And then the other thing that I think is great is, I know somebody out there is going to come and say, well, how do I create my API routes with TanStack Router? And I'm going to say, you don't, because it's a client side router. It's an application router, not a router for your data. If you want to do that, then you should use TRPC. And guess what? Astro has API routes built right in. So if you want to build an API route, you can do it in Astro and consume it in your app. If you want to build it with TRPC, you can do that. Build a TRPC router, shove it on a sub path on your Astro installation, and you're off to the races.
You go. You know what? I don't think this gets enough credit, that when you have put something together like the router, saying no is, I feel, just as valuable as saying yes or building something. Like the idea that's like, if you want an API route, this isn't it. It's not like it's on a roadmap or you can bolt it in. It's not purposed for it.
It's not my responsibility, and happily, but it's not just enough to say no. It's it's really like, it's as if you were doing networking in real life. You know, it's like, oh, hey, do you do carpentry? You can't just say no, right? You say no, but I've got a
Well,
friend.
yeah,
I
there it
know a
is.
guy who does it really well, and I have a great relationship with him, and I'm gonna hook you up, right? So that's the same attitude you want to get from your framework, from your tools, is saying, I'm good at this one thing. I don't do these other things you want, but I work really well with the things that do that, and here's how to do that. So it's you know, I believe that this goes all the way back to just like building tools that are single purpose and good at one thing, and also just working well with the entire ecosystem. You know, I'm really excited about this, and I hope it's obvious that we're not wrapping Astro. You know, I'm not creating TanStack Start CLI. Like you're you're going to use Astro. If you want to use TanStack Start, you have to use Astro, at least for now.
Yeah.
Um, and you're going to be interacting with Bling. Like the primitives are right there in your face. Um, and I think that's just really, I hope it, I hope it changes the tone a little bit for what we've seen with meta frameworks as of late. You know, everybody seems to be ultra competitive against each other, and uh, and I get it. There's businesses that have been built on these meta frameworks, and that's fine. But you know, this ultra competition can sometimes, it's supposed to breed excellence, but it can also breed a lot of double work, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
doing a lot of the same things. It can breed a lot of overlap as well. And I think that's something that Ryan Carniato and I, we don't have businesses that you know need these meta frameworks to survive. Uh, so we're just looking for the fastest path to getting stuff done. You
Yeah,
know?
which is sharing and community adaptability and interoperability,
Yeah,
and being able to stack knowledge together while the Astro people are doing amazing content work and build config that you can
yeah,
sort of work off of that sort of integrations,
yeah.
and interop config part.
And I gotta have another shout out to Nikhil Saraf, because he's just done amazing work with Bling. I know it's under the TanStack repo, but honestly, it's all his. Like he's done so many good things with it. And you know, he was telling me the other day, he's like, I'm so excited about this because I've been using Solid Start, but I have some React stuff, and now I'm going to get to use kind of the same primitives for my React stuff too. Now he's really excited about it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fantastic work, Nikhil. Really appreciate your time and effort and excitement in here. I really enjoy like the change in conversation and community and stuff. I think is really important. I think the maybe the early phase of maybe we're coming out of phase one of meta frameworks and into uh, joining forces and sort of not reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch, or being so locked into if I pick a meta framework, then I have to like, pick my deployment target, and like those two choices are stone cold, right? You don't go back on either one of those once you've sort of got it configured and set up. It's a one-way ticket.
Yeah.
Th-
And it's a pendulum that swings back and forth between, you know, having an ecosystem that is, you cobble it together yourself, and you kind of you use a lot of different tools that work well together. The pendulum swings from there to walled garden monolith systems built for productivity. It's always swinging back and forth, and you know, usually it's this. I think you hear it all the time. It's the bundling and unbundling of the ecosystem, right?
yep.
And Remix and Next and these big monolithic frameworks have been the bundling phase of saying, okay, we have great tech, let's bundle it to get productive. But then new patterns, new technology, new libraries, new ways of thinking come around, and you can't. It's difficult to integrate those new ideas into a bundled solution. So we unbundle, right? And then
Yep.
we
Sort of.
upgrade things in their lane, and then ultimately we'll end up bundling back together again and unbundling. So it's just a constant. It's a constant journey, and at some point, as a company, as a business owner, who has an application that just needs to work. Like at some point, you need to say, okay, here is this bundled version of whatever we have, or this really good story for using the technology, and you kind of just have to commit and start using it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have these emotional swings in a single day where in the morning I just need to be productive and I just need my tools out of the way and I want to move forward in things. And then after lunch, I want to explore and sort of, have this conversation with you and sort of peel things apart and sort of get into the gritty things. I've got a particular problem that needs solving and the solution isn't there. So like I'm battling this this bundling, unbundling emotionally on a daily basis. So like,
yeah, me too.
I feel like it's inherent a lot to engineers and people in our space, in our community.
Absolutely.
Well, Tanner, thank you so much. This has been an amazing sort of insight into sort of your tooling and how your process and the sort of the lead up to from tables to router to server. I think Bling is a apt name. I love the sort of $ connotation with it. Takes me back to the late 90s.
Yeah.
I hope the new kids understand what the Bling is.
Yeah. jQuery, it was a thing,
Yeah, I still think every time I see $, I have this sort of like twitch where I'm like, oh, jQuery. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like I need to sort of get over that sort of initial flinch. Because it's popping up a lot, and I really sort of enjoy that sort of throwback to it.
Me too.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing with us openly about what you're working on and the people that you're working on with it, and giving them credit and helping the community out with all your tooling. I know I've benefited greatly from Query before and made my life a lot easier multiple times. So I appreciate that effort.
I think we have a new version of Query coming out soon.
Oh, nice.
Dominic Dorfmeister has really been working hard on it.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to have a couple other surprises coming with that new version. I'm really excited for him. He's putting a lot of work into it, but it's going to be fantastic. So
Brilliant.
Get excited for that one.
Early Christmas. Amazing. Thank you so much to everyone out there. This is not the end of the conversation. For those of you who are listening, when you get to your computer, you're going to go to the YouTube and you're going to pull up the video and you're going to look at all the code that me and Tanner just talked you through, and your mind's going to melt a little bit. So it's going to explode. It's really, really great stuff. I want to thank this Labs for the time and the space to do this, and to Tanner especially, and Nozzle, his company, for giving him the time and the space to come on and talk to me and the larger community as well. Any last words, Tanner?
Yeah, if you are listening to this and you want to help, then come on over to the TanStack Discord. You can go to tanstack.com. There's a link up at the top for our Discord group. But yeah, as you can tell, we're very open and just want to work with great people. So if you're one of those people, then come hang out with us.
I know where I'm going directly after this. I'm going to head over there. You've piqued my interest, and now I'm going to sort of lurk in the Discord for a little while and see what's going on there, because this is you've got me, Tanner. I'm hooked.
Do it. Totally. I'll be there.
All right. I'll see you over there. We'll see all of our audience members over there. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you later.
See ya.